Coming up on Bridge City News, another male has been charged with second-degree murder in connection with the death of a 43-year-old man last week. There's a top Liberal supporter in Vancouver who apparently would like to see people shot for not honoring physical distancing protocols. Political reporter Brian Lillley has more. And the province of Alberta has come out with more of its relaunch plans of which businesses can reopen. We have the details.
Your nation. Your province. Your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge police have charged a second male in connection with the death of a 43-year-old man last week. On April 27th, police responded to an injured male at an apartment building along 4th Avenue South. An investigation revealed that the man was fatally injured when a fight broke out outside of his apartment the day before. A friend went to the victim's apartment the following day, found him unresponsive, and called for help. 33-year-old Justin Whitecow is charged with second-degree murder. 27-year-old Jason Crane Chief was similarly charged earlier. Both men will appear in court for a bail hearing on May the 11th. Another drug dealer has been taken off the streets, this one in Fort Macleod. Alert Lethbridge teamed up with a Fort Macleod RCMP to take down the 47-year-old female dealer at a home. She had carfentanil, methamphetamine, cocaine, 3 rifles, and around $14,000 in cash. Nicole Colaci, who is known to police, faces various weapons and drug-related charges. This is Emergency Preparedness Week across Canada. Now, there are 2 organizations in Lethbridge which are no stranger to calamity.
It's always a wise thing to look out for your neighbor, to look out for your community, to keep your eyes open for people who may be in need or in distress. And of course, the educational piece is share with your neighbor what a 72-hour preparation kit may look like.
So these kits can really have anything. It's whatever you think you're going to need to take care of yourself. Of course, we have the necessities: food, water, clothing, anything extra for blankets or candles, anything like you would put in your vehicle if you were expecting to be in an accident or something similar, stranded. Making sure that you've got your medications, glasses, recreational items like books or cards that can keep yourselves busy and pass the time, which might happen as well. One of the more forgotten ones is the pet element, making sure that you've got medications, food, cat litter if you've got a cat, or anything similar that would help take care of your pet in that incident as well.
Emergency Preparedness Week is coordinated by Public Safety Canada in collaboration with the provinces and territories. The province announced today that there were 6 more COVID-related deaths in Alberta. There were 70 new cases, bringing the total number to 5,963. Fortunately, more than 3,500 people have now recovered from the virus. Our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. DEENA HINSHAW, says outbreaks continue at meat processing facilities, but fortunately, some people have now recovered.
At the Cargill facility, there are now 946 cases in workers, with 798 that have now recovered. There have also been 566 cases among workers at the JBS plant in Brooks. Of these, 434 have now recovered. Finally, at Harmony Beef, there are 38 confirmed cases, including 12 who have now recovered. I want to be clear that we are monitoring each of these outbreaks very closely, working with operators to contain the spread, and making sure that all public health measures are being enforced and taken seriously.
More details from the Government of Alberta's relaunch plans have come to light. The province announced that many healthcare workers, such as dentists, audiologists, and dietitians, can resume services. Beginning May 14th, Alberta Parks' online campground reservation system will be open for bookings at certain campgrounds beginning June 1st. Also on May 14th, some businesses and facilities will be allowed to resume full operations with enhanced infection prevention and controls in place. And they include some retail businesses like clothing, furniture, and bookstores, all farmers market vendors, hair salons and barbershops, more scheduled surgeries and dental procedures. Cafes, restaurants, pubs, and bars can reopen for public seating at 50% capacity. Museums and art galleries will also reopen, as will daycares and out-of-school care with occupancy limits. College and universities will continue course delivery online or in person, depending upon restrictions in place. The province's gatherings of more than 15 people is still not permitted, and for groups under 15, physical distancing must still take place. 2 hair salons in Lethbridge are worried that May 15th is too early to open up again, and they say they're going to reopen at a later date. Both say that personal protective equipment will be mandatory for hairstylists to limit the spread of COVID-19. Micah Quinn has a story.
Yes, we look forward to seeing you too. Thank you.
Heather TYTULA is the owner of Brio Salon and Spa, and she says that it took a team effort to figure out that May 14th was too early to reopen to the public.
We as a team just felt like it was a little bit too soon. There was talk about the peak is going to be in the middle of May, so to open in the middle of May just didn't seem quite right. Felt a little pressured, honestly.
TYTULA also says that the hairstylists at Brio will be wearing masks when they come back to work.
There's lots of evidence that that's, the right thing to do and that, lessens the spread.
Delaney Weston is the owner of Chrome Salon and Spa, and she is also planning on reopening on a later date than May 14th.
We definitely won't be as prepared as we're hoping for, right? We want to be totally confident when we can reopen, and I don't think we have enough time before May 14th to do that.
Weston says they are working with their employees to figure out their schedules.
We have a team under 10 employees, so we are definitely able to keep everyone on board, keep everyone employed, and look into their schedules because some of them have to stay home now with childcare or with homeschooling, but we're going to do our hardest to make everyone stay on board.
Both the Chrome and Brio Hair Salon and Spas have said that customers have been very understanding and supportive during this time of COVID-19. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The COVID-19 pandemic forced the WHL to cancel its season. Now, prior to that, the Lethbridge Hurricanes were on pace to be the second best attended season in franchise history. The team averaged just under 4,000 fans per night at the NMAX Centre. In recognizing the success of the Canes this season, the WHL announced that the club was named the WHL Business of the Year. In total this season, just over 123,000 fans attended games. In addition, the Hurricanes helped contribute $163,000 to support other local organizations. Lethbridge City Council has approved the motion for property taxes to be deferred for 3 months for business owners and residents. This means that late penalties will be suspended on unpaid property taxes due to financial struggles because of COVID-19. Cindy Voss is the executive officer of the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, and she says she's happy that council is helping out local businesses right now.
Now that the stages are opening up, well, stage 1, 2, 3, etc., not everybody gets to go to work at the same time. So not everybody's going to have the same cash flow. So it's really exciting to see that this is opened a good path for them. A lot of people are relieved because, they're trying to figure out, okay, do I open or do I just permanently close? What are my options with my landlord? What's my lease? Am I going to keep it? Am I going to break it? Do I have to find a new place? So a lot of different questions. I think this just gives them that breathing space that they needed.
Council said on Monday that no late penalties will be instituted until at least September 30th. The Medicine Hat Chamber of Commerce has thrown its support behind the twinning of Highway 3. Chamber President Tracy Nolette says the highway is a critical pipeline for moving commodities from processors to markets, of which traffic is only set to increase over the next few years. She's asking the province to consider the economic benefits of twinning the highway. The 4 sections that the Highway 3 Twinning Development Association have identified that could be easily twinned are Highway 3, Stage 1A in Fort Macleod, Tabor to Burdett, Medicine Hat to Seven Persons, and Lundbreck to the Piikani Nation border. The group says with the Lethbridge Cavendish expansion taking place, along with the Purple Springs fertilizer plant and Lundbreck mining, twinning needs to take place sooner rather than later. Mother's Day is coming up this Sunday. Are you ready for it? Flowers are always a nice way to show mom just how much she's loved. Now, florists are doing their part to deliver flowers in a safe and effective manner during the COVID-19 pandemic. As BCN's Loris Alexander explains, the simple scent of a flower helps to bring so much joy during these trying times.
It's been busier than normal, I would honestly say. I think more and more people aren't getting out to visit in this situation, so they're sending flowers to their moms, and it's a little different situation with no walk-ins and stuff, but we're managing.
ULRICH says 2020 has been her busiest year yet for Mother's Day. She says flowers are always a popular gift for moms because they bring life.
To me, they are a true expression that there's something bigger than us that's beautiful and natural, and there's so much research on cognitive therapy and the benefits of flowers and greenery in life, and I think that's why even here people notice the difference when the leaves start budding and stuff, just feeling that life.
Flowers on 9th are delivered while maintaining social distancing, and the same applies for pickup.
We have no contact pickup, so people can phone and pay ahead of time, and then we'll just bring it out and leave it on the cart for them to pick up, and no contact delivery. We phone people first to set up a delivery window time, and then our drivers will just ring the bell and leave it on the step, and then they can go pick it up. And we're all like working with gloves and masks and just doing the best we can, right?
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Avenue Living has done some major Avenue giving. The rental company donated $100,000 to Canadian food banks. $17,000 has been shared between Lethbridge and Medicine Hat. The company says that they understand how connected shelter and food are in our community.
We have just over 600 doors or properties, apartments that we lease out in Lethbridge. Our typical demographic is workforce housing, so many of the people that have been affected through job loss or a cut of hours through the pandemic, unfortunately. So we're seeing that a lot of our residents have been directly impacted through this and looking to do what we can to support them in other creative ways.
Avenue Living provides housing to residents in nearly 20 communities across Canada. Many in Lethbridge are set to take part in a virtual stair climb. The event, organized by Wellspring Calgary, is geared towards fundraising for community-based programs which assist cancer patients and their loved ones. BCN's Ainsley O'Reilly spoke with organizers and sponsors of the event.
Each year, hundreds of firefighters from across the globe climb the stairs of Calgary's Bow Tower. Wellspring's Calgary Cancer Support Centre hosts the event.
I would love Southern Alberta to come to Calgary. We actually have expanded, believe it or not, worldwide.
The physically tasking endeavor isn't going to be canceled because of COVID-19. Instead, participants are going to time their climb and find somewhere locally to take part.
Climb where they can in a safe manner, where they're distancing. Send out some options for where you can climb in different locations.
Event partner Speed Stairs, a unique workout equipment, will be placing their gear at various locations in southern Alberta. They've suggested training at Indian Battle Park and beyond.
We'll just get as many as we can in southern Alberta, and then we could do this in a virtual setting. We could actually do some of the climbs right at the fire halls too.
Last year, about 600 firefighters fundraised just under $500,000 for the campaign. This year's targeted goal was about $600,000, but due to COVID-19, a lot of nonprofits have been forced to restructure their goals. Now, if you are interested in donating, you could always visit wellspringcalgary.ca. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
A moment of silence took place earlier today at the Cargill beef plant near High River in honor of an employee who died from COVID-19. 67-year-old Hayep Bouy, who worked at Cargill for 23 years, was responsible for picking out beef bones from hamburger meat. Health officials say there have been 949 cases of the virus linked to the plant. It reopened Monday after a 2-week shutdown. There have also been outbreaks at the JBS plant in Brooks and the Harmony beef plant near Calgary. The health authority in Saskatchewan has declared a COVID-19 outbreak at a Saskatoon dairy. Sask Milk, an organization that represents the industry, health officials say fortunately only one employee has tested positive so far, but they're anticipating more. Officials are investigating. Our country's chief public health officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says a dangerous affliction known as Kawasaki disease can hit children after many kinds of infections, including COVID-19. Pediatricians are used to seeing the inflammatory condition and can treat it, but whether it is a special concern in the current pandemic is still being examined.
So we do know that the illness in children are milder. I mean, that's been observed across international studies. So clinically, they have a much less severe outcome. That's not to say that rarely some more severe outcomes could occur, but that's basically what the scientific data is telling us. But of course, if there's any concerns, contact your health provider. Pediatricians are very aware of Kawasaki disease because it actually happens in other viral illnesses and infections as well.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is blaming some of his province's regional medical officers for an inconsistent rate of COVID-19 testing. Ford says some of the top doctors are not ordering enough testing in their regions, and that needs to change.
I was on here last few days saying they're doing a great job. They were hitting 17,000 consistently, and then all of a sudden you come in and you see the 10,000. I still say, you know, everyone's doing a great job. But when I looked at the chart, I'm going to get back on the table this afternoon. But when I look at the chart, it starts up here and it goes all the way down. And there's certain medical officers in certain jurisdictions. Now, keep in mind, we have 34 chief medical officers across the province. Some just aren't performing. I'm calling them out right now.
The Ontario government has announced that today it has also extended its emergency orders until May 19th, as 412 new cases of the virus were confirmed. With supplies of personal protective equipment running low, doctors and health professionals are often relying on charities to acquire masks and protective gowns. Well, in New York, teams of motorcyclists have stepped in to help.
To think that these are people that are putting their health and their lives on the line, people who are more often than not like selfless, and they're working in a situation where they can't even get what they need to protect themselves. Riding my motorcycle around the city to deliver PPE to people who really need it is the least I can do. You have a box as well, right? We're about to go on some PPE runs for Masks for Docs. It's a global organization. There's over 5,000 volunteers.
So all the gowns are going to Flushing. I happen to be in operations, that's my career. I just couldn't sleep knowing that I could possibly do something. The requests that we're getting in are just bigger than the supply that we actually have. The federal government left hospitals and local governments to basically fend for themselves, telling them if you want these supplies, you got to go out and buy them on your own. You can do that, but they can't.
Great to see how people are pitching in to help during the COVID-19 pandemic. Closer to home, many farmers have begun their spring planting, and if you're looking for some moisture, it's coming. Full weather details are coming up. We had sun mixed with cloud today, nice and warm again. Jeanette Rocher is here now with a full look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, for farmers looking for moisture, some good news may be on the horizon.
Yeah, definitely good news for them, Hal. And you know how they say April showers? Well, it's certainly May showers this year. Tonight, cloudy with a 30% chance of showers, a low of 6 degrees. Into tomorrow, we could see a 40% chance of showers and also a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm, high of 18 degrees and the overnight low of 5 degrees. And as we look further into the 5-day forecast, there's a chance of showers on Friday with windy conditions, high 11. Into Saturday, we're going to see that sunshine again with a high of 14. Sunday, cloudy, and we could see a possibility of some showers that evening, a 30% chance. Also a low of -2 on Sunday evening. So if you have flowers on the deck, you might want to think about bringing them in. Monday and Tuesday, mix of sun and cloud with a high of 12 on Monday and 15 degrees expected for us on Tuesday. And that almanac tells us that the average high, it's getting higher, 17 degrees, and we're falling into that range. The averages for the lows are 3 degrees. The high temperature on this day was back in 1992. It was 31 degrees, and it was -5 back in 1977. The sun rose this morning at just before 6 a.m. at 5:59, and sunset is scheduled for 8:56 p.m. And look at that, it's just about exactly almost 15 hours of daylight. Looking into tomorrow's highs, sunshine on the west coast, finally for them. 17 degrees is the high in Victoria, 16 in Vancouver. Edmonton, partly cloudy skies, high 17, high 15 expected tomorrow. Calgary could also see a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm as well. Mix of sun and cloud in Saskatoon with a high of 18. Regina's high tomorrow, 16 with the sunshine expected. Sunny conditions also expected for Winnipeg with a high of 9 degrees. And as we look further east, we're going to see more showers coming at us there. 40% chance of afternoon showers tomorrow in Toronto with a high of 11. A chance of showers also expected in Ottawa with a high of 11 degrees there as well. 15 is the expected high for Montreal. They could see a risk of an afternoon thunderstorm as well tomorrow. Fredericton could see a mix of sun and cloud, and there could be some periods of rain with that. High of 9 degrees there in Fredericton. High of 5 in Halifax. 7 is the expected high in Charlottetown. We could see some showers in both of those areas. St. John's, Newfoundland, high of 9 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud. There you go. That is your forecast.
Our country's Agriculture Minister, Marie-Claude Bebeau, applauded the federal government's announcement of $252 million to help our farmers during the COVID-19 pandemic. Many MPs, including Lethbridge Tory MP Rachel Harder, said it's not enough. In fact, the agriculture industry was asking for more like $2.5 billion. Now, one of our regular contributors, political journalist Brian Lillley, says what's interesting about Minister Bebeau is that it appears she spends more time wanting to see the oil sector shut down as opposed to focusing on helping our farming communities.
I'm told that, Bebeau doesn't actually show that much interest in agriculture and helping farmers. Her main preoccupation at the cabinet table is talking about how we end the oil industry and shut down the oil sands in Canada.
Mr. Lillley will have some more of the top stories coming from Ottawa, including how a top Liberal volunteer wants to see people shot who are not social distancing. That's coming up in the second half of our show. Airbnb says it is laying off 25% of its workforce as it confronts a steep decline in travel due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It is a serious setback for the 12-year-old home-sharing company.
That's 1,900 of about its 7,500 employees. This is at one point, like a really high-flying tech company. It was valued fairly recently at $31 billion. It was planning an IPO this year, but the global travel has just decimated this company. So it's kind of retrenching, and it's saying it wants to refocus just on its core business of home sharing. It is cutting things like investments in hotels and investments in luxury properties. Some experimentation it was doing on transportation and air transportation and movie production. It's just cutting back, refocusing, and cutting a lot of its employees.
Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 19 points on the day to finish at 14,830. The Dow was down 218 points to 23,664. The S&P 500 was down 20 points to 2846, and the Nasdaq was up 45 points to 8854. Oil was down 47 cents to $24.09 per barrel. Natural gas was down 19 cents to $1.95. Gold was down $2.49 to $16.8321 an ounce, and silver was down 4 cents to $14.82 an ounce. Wheat is at $234 per metric ton, barley's at $231, canola's at $4.66, and corn is at $230 per metric ton. Live cattle were up $3 to $89.48, feeder cattle were up $4.50 to $124.10, and lean hogs were up $1.95 to $68.20. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to $70.68 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge police have charged a second male in connection with the death of a 43-year-old man last week. On April 27th, police responded to an injured male at an apartment building along 4th Avenue South. An investigation revealed that the man was fatally injured when a fight broke out inside of his apartment the day before. A friend went to the victim's apartment the following day, found him unresponsive, and called for help. 33-year-old Justin Whitecow was charged with second-degree murder. 27-year-old Jason Cranechief was similarly charged earlier. Both men will appear for a bail hearing on May the 11th. When it comes to an environmental ranking, Canada did fairly well. Up next, BCN's Paul Arthur chats with a researcher from the Fraser Institute who has all of the details for us.
Polls consistently show that Canadians care about the environment. So it is interesting to see that we often read articles criticizing Canada for having a poor environmental track record. So we're going to take a look at that record to see if that is true or not. Today's guest is Elmira Aliakbari, Associate Director of the Centre for Natural Resource Studies at the Fraser Institute. She is the co-author of a study, Environmental Ranking for Canada and the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. And you can actually check out that study online at fraserinstitute.org. So welcome to Bridge City News, Elmira.
Thanks, Paul, for having me.
You bet. Well, can you first of all tell us why Canada often seems to end up with a low ranking compared to other nations? Are we doing that poorly?
So, as you pointed out, in recent years, several reports from other organizations have presented Canada as an environmental laggard, ranking us near the bottom of the list of OECD countries. But these reports didn't always use the most meaningful and relevant environmental measures to compare countries. And as a result, these reports unfairly presented Canada's environmental performance in some respects. So let me give you an example to make it more clear. Past reports, when they wanted to evaluate air quality across countries, they simply looked at emissions per person. In other words, they measure total emissions in each country and then they adjust that by the size of population. But when we want to evaluate air quality, the key question is not about emissions per person, but is about the exposure of people to air pollution. A few large industrial operations in some Canadian provinces may skew that metric that was used in past reports upward, but that may not necessarily translate into actual exposure to air pollution in urban areas where most people live. So when we are evaluating air quality, it's really critical that we account for people's exposure to air pollution, but that critical factor was missing in past reports. So we try to develop an improved methodology to correct those past mistakes, and we closely followed the methods that were developed by some economists at Yale University and Columbia University, and we compared and ranked 33 high-income OECD countries across a wide range of environmental measures that relate both to the protection of human health and the preservation of ecosystems. Overall, in this study, we have used 17 environmental indicators that cover key areas such as air quality, water quality, greenhouse gas emissions, and agriculture. And our study provides an aggregate score ranging from 0 to 100 across 17 environmental indicators to provide an easy way to understand how Canada performs relative to other countries when it comes to protecting the environment. And we have found that Canada performs relatively well. Canada ranks 12 out of 33 countries with a score of 67, which is above the OECD average. So contrary to some previous claims, we see that Canada has a good environmental record. And this is something that I guess all Canadians should be proud of.
Right, that's good to hear that perspective. Like you point out, the context matters, doesn't it, right? And especially when we're dealing with human health, okay, it's not just with the ecosystems, but they kind of both need to be measured there. That's what counts, I think, as well. So Canada 12th out of 33, so that's pretty decent. Which country, by the way, was on the bottom? And on the flip side, which one ranked in the top spot?
So the best performer was Sweden, followed by New Zealand and Finland. Sweden obtained a score of 80 out of 100, and the worst performer was South Korea.
Now, is there any, do we know offhand, like, is there anything that, big red flag that jumps out? This is why South Korea is way on the bottom and why Sweden is so much better than everybody else?
So it's just, we have used 17 environmental indicators and we have aggregated all those indicators to create an overall index. And when we have done that, we see that, like Sweden is the best performer while South Korea is the worst performer with a score of 41.4, which is way lower than the OECD average.
Okay. I'm curious, how did the U.S. do, our next door neighbor here?
Yes, so the United States performs slightly better than us.
Wow.
The United States, ranks 10 out of 33.
But pretty close. We're pretty comparable then. Okay.
Yeah. There was little difference.
And just to get some perspective on this, now you're again we have South Korea in the bottom, Sweden in the top, and we have again 11 nations, I guess, that rank better than Canada. Now, is there a large difference there, a big gap, or are we relatively speaking pretty close to these other countries, even the ones that are ahead of us?
When we compared Canada's score to the top performers, such as Sweden or New Zealand, we found that there was really little difference between us and those top performers. For example, the second place, New Zealand, obtained a score of 74.7, which is not much higher than Canada's score. Overall, most of the top-ranked countries in our study cluster closely together, and that's why we see that there is really little difference between us and top.
Right, so it's a little bit, maybe if I can use this analogy, when we watch the Olympics, the top 10 finalists running in the 100-meter sprint, it's amazing. They're finishing this close. The difference between top spot and 10th spot, maybe hundredths of a second, right? I mean, they're all good, right? There's no one here that go, oh man, that guy really sucks. No, they're all incredibly good. So Canada is doing well. So, okay, why don't we start off with the air quality ranking? How did we do there?
So Canada performs exceptionally well on air quality. In order to accurately measure air quality and its impact on human health, we have used two measures in this study. The first one examines the extent to which people are actually exposed to harmful fine particulate matter. Fine particulate matter is a common and key air pollutant that includes smokes, dust, and fumes. And on that measure, Canada performs really well. We ranked 4. The second measure related to air quality examines the portion of the population in each country exposed to unsafe air pollutants levels set by the World Health Organization. So Canada is a top performer on that measure, with 100% of Canadians exposed to levels of fine particulate matter that comply with the air quality standard. So overall, Canada performs exceptionally well on that area.
Yeah, interesting. Is there any particular reason? Does it have to do with our population being spread out so widely across the country? We have smaller population areas. Is that something that affects that, or?
So in this study, we haven't really looked into reasons behind any particular finding or ranking. So I cannot really comment on any reasons, any reason that has caused basically this great result for Canada or any other countries.
But the good news is we've got good air quality. All right. How about water? That's another big one, of course. And I understand this is based on 2 indicators that assess the health risks posed by water pollution, access to improved sanitation facilities, and also access to improved water sources. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yes, we, as you mentioned, for water quality, we have used several indicators. Just the 2 that you just mentioned are related to water quality and its impact on human health. And on those 2 measures, we ranked 13. But I should note that on those measures, almost all the countries performed really well. So there was really little difference between us and top performers. With respect to water quality, another key indicator that we looked at was wastewater treatment. This is a key driver of water quality. And this indicator tracks the portion of wastewater from municipalities, household, and industry sources that are treated before releasing into the environment. And we ranked 17 on this measure. But it's important to note that there are a number of measures in our study on which almost all the countries do well. So even if Canada's ranking is relatively low on a particular measure, there is often little difference between us and top performers.
We shouldn't be losing any sleep over your ranking 17th, I guess, for wastewater treatment compared to some of the other countries, because it is actually very close, is what you're saying, right? So,
exactly.
Okay, interesting.
We're ranking relatively low because we are comparing ourselves against a group where everyone is doing well.
And you had also another rank. We apparently finished 4th, I think, for the intensity of use of our water resources. What does that mean, the intensity of use?
Yes, so that measures, that's another indicator that we have used, and that measures freshwater withdrawal as a percentage of total water resources. To put it simply, this indicator compares countries' abilities to ensure sustainable management of water resources. And on that measure, we ranked really well, and we ranked 4.
That's good to know. Now, greenhouse gases, of course, this is a big one everybody talks about a lot. So how did we do here, and what do you actually base that ranking on?
For greenhouse gas emissions, we have looked at three indicators. One of the indicators that we looked at was carbon intensity, which measures carbon dioxide emissions adjusted by the size of the economy. On that measure, Canada ranks 31st out of 33 countries. But, when we are looking at this result, we should also keep in mind that Canada is a massive country with with cold climate and with long transportation distances and even large natural resource sector. Clearly, the size of a country's land mass drive some of its need for energy and its subsequent greenhouse gas emissions. Many of the OECD countries that are performing better than Canada on this measure are smaller countries with milder climate, with higher population density, meaning that these countries have less energy needs compared to Canada. So we should keep in mind these basically natural limitations that Canada has when we're comparing Canada to other countries. Another indicator that we looked at, which is related to greenhouse gas emissions, is low emitting electricity production. This indicator measures the share of total electricity that is generated from low emitting energy sources such as nuclear or renewables. And on that measure, Canada performs really well. We ranked 8 out of 33 countries.
Okay, yeah, again, like you say, the context actually does matter. Again, size of the country, what are the actual energy needs? It is cold up here. In Vancouver, you guys are doing not too badly, but hey, Lethbridge gets pretty cold too. So now Canada only ranked 29th for forest cover. Does that mean, we're overcutting our forests? Can you explain that one?
So with respect to forest cover, despite preserving its forest cover over a decade, Canada ranks relatively low. As you mentioned, it ranks 29. And the reason is that while we have preserved our forests over a decade, other countries have somewhat expanded their forest cover over the same period. That's why we rank relatively low when compared to other OECD countries.
Okay, so we got to get busy and plant some more trees. All right. On the biodiversity front, how did we compare with other nations as to the number of species we have at risk?
So yes, we looked at that. That indicator, which measures the number of species that are in risk of extinction as a percentage of total known species, and we ranked relatively well. We ranked 12 out of 33 countries.
Okay. Of course, Canada, known for a large agricultural industry here. How was our record on environmental issues there related to agriculture with fertilizer use, for example?
Canada has a really good record on environmental issues related to agriculture. So among the main concerns relating to agriculture are excessive use of fertilizers and intensive use of pesticides. So we compared and ranked countries based on the intensity of using fertilizer in agricultural system, and Canada ranks really well. We ranked 4. And we also compared countries on average pesticide use per area of cropland, and again we ranked relatively well. We ranked 11 out of the 33 countries.
Okay, well, I'm up against the clock here, Elmira, but big picture, Canada sounds like does not have any major reasons to be overly concerned with our environmental record in comparison to other OECD nations, correct?
Exactly. The evidence is clear. Most developed countries have established sound environmental protection regimes, and Canada fares well when compared to other high-income countries.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Elmira. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
The The Trudeau Liberals recently offered up $252 million to our country's agriculture sector. That includes beef processors like Cargill. As one of our biggest trading partners, the United States is facing a beef shortage. To talk more about it is one of our regular contributors, Brian Lillley, joins us from Toronto via Skype. Now, Brian, $252 million. I talked with Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder. She says, really, that's crumbs. They need more like $2 billion for a handout right now.
Yeah, the industry was asking for about $2 to $2.6 billion, depending on which sector you were talking to or which sectors. I mean, it's a multifaceted industry. You know, lumping all farmers, all agricultural producers, all sections of agri-food together is quite simply ridiculous. And you heard that as you talked to various sectors. This is a real problem. And the day after the Prime Minister offers $850 million to the World Health Organization to help find a vaccine, offering $252 million to Canada's farmers to help with the problems they're facing does seem a bit like chump change. Look, I'm a fiscal hawk, but this is a government that has spent so fast, Hal, that we're now facing a deficit of $252 billion. I'm old enough to remember not that long ago when that was the entirety of the federal budget. And really, it's well over 50 to 60% of the federal budget now. So why just $252 million? We're looking at about $77 billion to help with getting PPE into the system. We're looking at $50 million to buy up food that might go to waste otherwise and then distribute it to people that need it. All these are good things. But you know, we're talking about an industry that, if it's not handled properly, could result in food shortages. I don't know if you've seen, but the New York Post had a headline the other day. It said, "Where's the beef?" Why? Because Wendy's, who made that line famous back in the 1980s, is running out of beef. And a good chunk of their restaurants now have to take hamburgers off of the menu. So the line that started in the 80s as a shot at McDonald's for their burgers being too small is now coming back to bite Wendy's because the American food supply chain isn't working the way it should. Are we going to face that problem in Canada? Well, industry experts that I'm talking to are saying, look, right now, probably not. We're kind of facing a glut when it comes to meat protein, be it beef, pork, poultry. There's a bit of extra in the supply. And in fact, when it comes to beef, a lot of the cattle can't be taken off the fields. They can't be taken out of pasture or even sent to finishing yards because there's no way to process them yet. But come summer, we could end up facing either a shortage or we could be facing big price increases. So there are problems on the horizon for the meat industry in Canada. For the agriculture industry in particular, I spoke to one farmer, normally plants about 900 acres of broccoli, but given the way things are going right now, he's worried if he'll be able to get even half of that into the ground this summer.
Brian, some provinces are slowly opening up their economies, including here in Alberta. I can finally go in for my chiropractic adjustment. But most Canadians say they're okay with this slow way that the premiers are relaunching their economies.
Yeah, an awful lot of people say, you know what, go slow, we're fine with that. I do have to wonder, though, how many of those people are retirees or civil servants who, for them, it doesn't matter. And, you know, I've spoken to a couple of pollsters and asked them, are you able to get me information on that? Are we talking about people whose livelihood relies on getting a paycheck from the private sector? Or are we talking about people who are, well, not overly reliant? Look, simple fact of the matter is across Canada, only about 62% of the public are actually in the workforce. When you look at how big the public sector is, the broader public sector, when you include teachers, nurses, doctors, police officers, everyone else, people that face no risk of being laid off, you're down to about 30% of the population. Well, in some cases, that's the percentage saying we need to open back up because they're reliant on a private sector paycheck. So I've asked for that information. We don't have that yet. In this case, though, I will point out, Hal, that it's about 50% in Alberta that are saying go slow. That may be because of recent spikes in cases in Alberta, including at the Cargill plant in High River, where people are saying, okay, maybe not yet. Or, maybe it's also in Quebec where they had a couple of bad days of numbers and the province there was slated to reopen schools and retail stores next week. And now in the Montreal area, their epicenter, they've put it off by another week. So, there's a lot of factors at play here that we don't quite understand yet.
So despite the fact that economies are slowly reopening, the Prime Minister is still encouraging people to stay home.
Yeah, he's saying don't go out unless you absolutely have to. That's probably not what someone like Brian Pallister wants to hear. The Premier of Manitoba almost threw the doors wide open for their economy reopening on Monday. Most sectors were allowed to get back to as close to normal as they can. Social distancing rules still apply. All of that, people being encouraged to wear masks and take other precautions. But they have the most wide open economy right now. Now, Manitoba, not a lot of cases there. Also, not a very big population. Same with Saskatchewan next door, which is going a bit slower. But when you look at the big population centers, whether we're talking about an Alberta, a British Columbia, Ontario especially, or Quebec, the premiers are going a little bit slower, but they are still reopening. And it's funny to watch the Prime Minister try and act as if he has some kind of say in this. He didn't have a say in the provinces shutting down their economies, and he definitely doesn't have a say in them opening back up. He has tried to get them all to agree to some basic principles and try and say, well, these are the federal rules for reopening. But let's be honest, those rules that they put out in a joint statement are so banal that everyone would agree to them, which is why all the premiers did agree. And even without federal help, they would have said, yes, you can only reopen when it's safe, and you've got to make sure that workers and customers and businesses are safe. We don't need the federal government telling us these things, and we don't need the federal government telling us to stay home. I guarantee you, Hal, even as things reopen, people will be much more cautious than they were before in terms of how often they go out, when they go out, and how they act when they are out in public.
Now, Brian, here's a shocking story. A top Liberal volunteer in Vancouver says anyone who breaks the rules around social distancing should be shot, but not shot with one of the guns which has been talked about being banned, right?
Well, I don't think he cares what type of gun they use, and we'll get to the gun ban in a couple of minutes. But yeah, this guy's name is Mark Elias, and he's been in trouble before for some outrageous comments, and he still remains president of the Vancouver East Liberal Association. He was speaking on social media and saying that he agrees with Filipino President Duterte in saying, if you break any kind of curfew, you break the rules around staying home, you should be shot. This guy actually called for people to be shot on sight. How do you remain the head of the Liberal, he's not the president of the Liberal Association of Lethbridge. He's, downtown urban elitist Vancouver, and he remains president there. This guy's got to be shown the door if the Liberal Party wants to hold any kind of moral sway as they continue this debate.
Any kind of credibility, absolutely. Now, Brian, let's talk about that gun ban. Many Canadians are not happy about it, saying it'll do nothing to address the serious issue of illegal guns crossing the border and gang violence. And you've spoken to premiers who are also against it.
Yeah, premiers Kenney, Moe, and Ford all came out against it last week. I did ask Premier Pallister about it. Did not hear back. Police chief in Calgary has spoken out against it. The chiefs of police have said that you don't need this sort of thing, and yet the government's going ahead with it. Before we get into the minutiae, Hal, of what type of gun is actually being banned, let me point this out to you. The federal Liberals promised $327 million over 5 years to fight guns and gangs, and that includes gun smuggling at the border. Now, we all agreed that we want guns and gangs to stop. Okay, so they've promised $327 million over 5 years. Only $86 million of that goes to stopping gun smuggling at the border. Yet when it comes to buying guns from legal licensed gun owners who aren't shooting up the streets of Calgary, Lethbridge, Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, or anywhere else, they're going to spend $600 million. That's their estimate. And just like the gun registry, that number will go up. So they're going to spend far more than double what they will spend on fighting guns and gangs with people that are actually causing the gun violence than they will, to buy back these guns. And they're using the tragedy in Nova Scotia, which was not committed with legal guns, was not committed by a licensed gun owner. It was committed by someone who, just like the gangbangers, turns around and imports guns from the United States. This is messed up beyond belief, and it targets the wrong type of guns. The C7 that I trained on in the Canadian military back in 1990 is banned again because it was never legal, but it's on the list. You've never been allowed to buy that as a civilian.
Let's go back to chatting about COVID-19 for just a moment here. One of the things we've been told is that we need better testing when it comes to the coronavirus to get society somewhat back to normal, Brian. A promising Canadian test has been pulled over recently because of concerns it's not working properly. Can you explain?
Yeah, this is the Spartan Cube. This was the one that everyone was hopeful of. You know, the Americans have their 5-minute to 15-minute test from Abbott Laboratories, and we were hopeful that we had to get something. Abbott is not selling this test anywhere but the United States at this point. They don't have the capacity to fill the orders. The United States government is taking up all the capacity they have to produce their quick test, and we need something. If we want to be able to open up, if we want to be able to test high-risk populations going into workplaces, be it long-term care centers or that Cargill plant in High River, we need something that doesn't take 2 days to get a result back. And so this Spartan Cube was produced by a company, a biotech company out of Canada in the west end of Ottawa. You remember Ottawa, Hal? The west end is a high-tech hub. There was all sorts of hope for this. The Alberta government had placed orders. The Quebec government, Ontario government, the feds had promised millions for it. And then it started, before most provinces had even started rolling it out, Quebec started to experience problems with the test not delivering accurate results in their long-term care facilities. Now Health Canada has put it on hold. We don't know if or when it will be back up. The company is saying by summer. That may be too late. So we need something, and we need it quick.
One of the big questions is, how did the virus hit the world stage? There are now questions about whether it was in countries outside of China a little bit earlier. In fact, there was a report that a man in France tested positive for the coronavirus back in December.
Yeah, this is a guy who showed odd symptoms, and they weren't quite sure what it was in late December. And they've gone back and they've retested cultures that they had from him because, you know, they did a swab test to say, okay, what does this guy have? You know, just like when it first showed up in China, it was initially described as an odd pneumonia-like condition. So they didn't know what this guy had. He's a man in his 40s. He's since recovered, had no history of travel. Well, they said they've run the test multiple times and that he has tested positive for COVID-19. So did it originate there? Did it originate in China? Did it originate in the wet market or the lab? You know, we don't know where this thing came from, but I can tell you this from my own writing, my own experience, Hal. As we discuss this, once you say that it may have started in the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the lab where they study coronaviruses in bats, you know, they've got a woman there. She's known as the Bat Woman. She's a scientist who goes into caves, collects bats, and then studies the viruses they have. When you suggest that it leaked out of there, it is immediately dismissed. Why? Not because Chinese scientists posited this in late January, early February, not because the State Department had suggested this in cables earlier, but because about 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump said, oh yeah, I've heard of this. I'm hearing more about it. So, you know, my take on this is we can't let how someone feels about Donald Trump, positive or negative, determine the science. We've got to look at all the evidence and follow where it leads. We can't say, well, we won't look at that because Orange Man is bad, and you know, if he said it, it can't be true. That's not how science works, and it would be a shame if we did it here.
The Trudeau Liberals have been slow to criticize China over COVID and other issues, and they're now mum on the status of Hong Kong protesters seeking asylum.
Yeah, about 46 democracy protesters from Hong Kong have put in to become refugees, they're political asylum seekers here in Canada. And the government so far has not welcomed them with open arms. I mean, you know, it's a lot harder for these democracy protesters. And we saw what it was like in Hong Kong, the pitched battles in the streets, the oppression imposed by the regime in Beijing on people in Hong Kong. Well, you would expect that they might just say, okay, let these people in. No, they are facing far stricter measures than the people that have simply been walking across the border for the last 2.5 years. To my mind, it's a bit ridiculous. Asked to speak about this, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland did say, and she's right on this, that she can't speak about the specific cases, but she also wouldn't speak out in favor of the democracy movement in Hong Kong at the time. She did say that she believes in the one country, two systems, which has long been what the international community has supported, that Hong Kong is now part of China, but they have two different systems. That was good to hear, but neither she nor the rest of the government is standing up for these democracy protesters who say they will be persecuted if they're forced to remain in Hong Kong.
Brian, we have about a minute left here. Now, there are calls from Ottawa and a Liberal MP to see the oil sands shut down in Fort McMurray. Tell me more about that.
Well, there's a lot of calls for that, but one of them that I've been hearing is Marie-Claude Bibeau. She is the agriculture minister who's behind this $252 million rescue package for the agriculture industry, but she's part of what I dubbed the Mud Hut Brigade of Trudeau's cabinet. That would include Catherine McKenna, the former environment minister, John Wilkins, the current environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, the heritage minister, and I'm told that, Bibeau doesn't actually show that much interest in agriculture and helping farmers. Her main preoccupation at the cabinet table is talking about how we end the oil industry and shut down the oil sands in Canada. We always knew there was a strong section of that, which is why it took so long for even the meager package that came out to help the oil industry on Alberta, why it took so long for that to come out. But to find out that the ag minister spends more time on that, according to some colleagues, than she does on dealing with issues related to farming and the food sector, that's more than a little disappointing.
Wow. One of our regular contributors, Brian Lilly, joining me once again from Toronto. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.